Welcome to Storied, the untold Jewish stories behind your favorite artists. Season 1, The Beatles. In each episode, we're going to dive deep into the history and the legacy of the Beatles, focusing on where Jews and the Jewish community contributed and collaborated in very important ways. Each episode begins with a recording from our live show telling a quick and short version of the story, followed by a deep dive really getting into it as I interview some special guests. Jewish events today can be appropriately hard. We have some serious issues that we're grappling with as a community. They often require a box of tissues and a therapy appointment. The Storied live show was conceived and developed at the J Detroit in partnership with the Berman Theater, not as the answer to this problem, but as an answer to this problem. We are focused on positive narrative, Jewish joy, and reminding people about the great contributions made by the Jewish community. We're excited to see Storied grow with this podcast and more live shows. Now, you may be here because you're a Beatles fan, or you may be here because you're looking for positive Jewish content. In either case, our intent is for all of your delight. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see this awesome shirt that was designed and made by our sponsor of the show, Yonatees. They make both custom merch and some really great Jewish-themed merch, like the ones popping up on the screen right now. If you're listening on an audio feed, pop over to YouTube just to see what I'm showing you, because it's worth it. If you would like to sponsor an episode, we would love to talk to you. Check out the links below, including our website, www.storied.show, for more information about who we are, what we do, the other bands and genres we've covered, or how you can bring this live show to your city. If you like what we've done here, please leave us a review and maybe some stars. If you have any questions, hit us up on our socials. We'd love to hear from you. All the links are in the show notes. And with that, let's get this show on the long and winding road. Hey there. Welcome to episode 1 of Storied, the untold Jewish stories behind your favorite music. I cannot express to you how excited I am to have you listening to this show. This is incredible. It's a culmination of years of work and decades of passion. In this first episode, we're talking to a guy by the name of Moodie Sandberg. Moodie was a Knesset member in Israel's parliament, somebody who went across the world to see Beatles members playing in concert. He's a historian. He's a superfan. He's a man who in 1996 started a radio show in Israel on 88 FM in Haifa. It was a Beatles hour. So every week he gets on the radio and he talks to people in Israel about the Beatles and who they are and what they do, and tells the stories that I love. To say that he has a vast knowledge of the Beatles is an understatement. The stories that he knows and the things that he was able to recall are absolutely fascinating. He filled in a lot of blanks that I had as I told the story in our live show, and I had to edit back some of the details. He had even more details, and he was throwing stuff at me that I was just lapping up. I absolutely loved it. He even shared some stories that I had no idea about, from John and Yoko studying Kabalah with a rabbi in New York, to really important and significant details about Akiva Nof, which is episode 10, and his appearance with John and Yoko at the Bed-In in 1969. It was absolutely fascinating. I'm so thrilled to have you guys check out this first episode and hear these stories. Let me tell you something. The next 13 episodes to complete the 14 episode season of Storied Season 1 are going to leave every Beatles fan with their jaws on the floor, having a whole new appreciation for the history and the legacy of what I like to refer to as this comet-like burst of creativity. The Beatles changed the way that rock and roll music was played. The Beatles changed the way that rock and roll music was appreciated. And the Beatles changed the way that rock and roll music was consumed. And now we get to talk about that. But the twist is that we're focused on the Jewish stories. And you're going to find a whole bunch of incredible stories. I hope that you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed it, because this has been an absolute thrill of a lifetime. All the hard work that's gone into this, from our first show at the J here in West Bloomfield with the Berman Theater, to the multiple shows that we've done since then, the different genres, the different bands, we were only waiting for this moment to arrive. This is the next step, and I appreciate you being here. Welcome everybody to Storied. Really excited that you guys are here, and I think that we're going to make history tonight. The Berman is the perfect place to do this. We're going to be talking about the Beatles. We're going to be uncovering stories about the personalities, the places, the things that happened to make a cultural icon explode and focusing on the Jewish community and the story and their relationship with the Beatles. And please keep your mind and your ears open to the words collaboration and contribution. That's going to be the focus tonight, collaboration and contribution. Those were the greatest comet-like burst of creativity that the world has ever seen. And the ability for the Jewish community to not just come along for the ride, but again, collaborate and contribute to that is pretty amazing. Speaking of collaboration and contribution, Eric, who said it very awesome, Eric is right that when I brought this idea to Eric and Brian Siegel and Judy Lobel and Stephen Counterwitz and Rachel DeVries, they basically said, sure, let's do it. And I can't thank them enough because this wouldn't be happening if they weren't so open to that collaboration, to that contribution. I have to mention a couple of people and say thank you to them. First of all, a guy that I refer to as my walking Beatles encyclopedia, Ben Schutz, who bounced a lot of ideas and checked myself, and he did a lot more than Google was able to do for me. So thank you, Ben. Another Ben is Ben Hubert, who's my business partner, who helped me keep all the plates spinning while I was spending time working on this. I don't know if you saw the email, but we closed the deal today. That's a good thing while I was getting ready for this. So thank you, Ben, for keeping all the plates spinning. And then lastly, my wife, Sarah, who without her, I would not be able to keep any plates spinning. So Sarah is sick and she's not here tonight. Thank you. Clap for her. People assume that tonight is going to be the Brian Epstein story, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. Brian was one spoke in the wheel in what happened with the Beatles. We're going to go behind the scenes. We're going to grapple with some complex issues. We're going to talk about 3 different men who were called or called themselves the 5th Beatle. Our story tonight is going to be mostly linear in order of history, but I moved some things around so that we can tell a cohesive story. So I think you're going to find that the order makes somewhat sense if you're not paying too much attention. But do pay attention to the words collaboration and contribution, because that, again, is the focus tonight. So that's the intro. We're going to start now. Early years started as a pre-Beatles band, 4 guys from Liverpool, and even more, there was 6, the John Lennon pre-Beatles band called the Quarrymen. And there was a musician in the Quarrymen by the name of Nigel Wally, who the band to become their manager because he wasn't as good of a musician. He was playing golf at the Jewish Golf Club with Joseph Snyder. He said to Dr. Snyder, hey, can you introduce me to your son, Alan Snyder, who's the manager of the Cavern Club? Because he wanted to book the Quarrymen at the Cavern Club, but Alan said, listen, before you guys get a chance to hit the stage at the Cavern Club, why don't you play some gigs at the golf club and see how it goes? So the first paid gig for the Quarrymen was in July of 1957 at the Jewish Golf Club, the Lee Park. A week later, the Quarrymen were on the stage of the Cavern Club. They were playing the side stage for the real jazz bands, and they were playing a style of music called skiffle, and Beatles historians refer to that as the skiffle sessions. But it wasn't just golf clubs. A friend of the band, Alan Swerdlow, not only was a photographer and he photographed a lot of their early shows. You can see his pictures back there. He ran the youth dances at the Green Bank Drive Synagogue, and he booked the Quarrymen at the synagogue. As they changed the name to the Beatles and Ringo officially joined the band, they started to grow and they got bigger and they got better. And they were playing at a riverboat ferry nicknamed the Fish and Chip Boat. And this was a boat tour that was put on by none other than Ray McFall, the owner of the Cavern Club. Alan Sittner, the club's manager. 1961, at a lunchtime gig, our man Brian Epstein lays eyes on the Beatles for the first time. Brian was raised in a Yiddish-speaking Orthodox home and walks over to John Lennon and says, if you guys hire me, I'm going to make you bigger than Elvis. John Lennon responds in his typical cheeky self, and he goes, I don't believe that, but I want the guy who manages us to believe that, so you're hired. Brian eventually became known as the 5th Beatle, a title that he wore proudly. In the early days, the Beatles were playing repertoire that consisted a lot of cover songs. And you're going to see a bunch of those cover songs up on the screen. Many of these cover songs were written by Jews. Specifically, this list was written by Jews. Hey, everybody. We're here for the inaugural episode of Storied, the Jewish contribution to the Beatles. I'm really excited to get into it today with Moodie Sandberg, who is one of the most qualified people that we're going to see on this podcast this season. I'm thrilled to have it. Moodie, thank you for being here. I appreciate you.
Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. So everybody just heard the introduction, so they know that you are the host of Israel's Beatles radio show every week on Friday at 4 p.m. on Radio 88 FM out of Haifa. But before we start, I wanted to have you tell the story. If you're watching on YouTube, you see at the bottom it says Eliezer, but you go by Moodie. How did we get from Eliezer to Moodie?
My real name is Eliezer. It was the name of my grandfather who was killed, murdered in the Holocaust. But when I was young, a little baby, they started to call me Hamoudi, which means cute in Hebrew. And, they just shortened it to Moody. And ever since, I'm called Moody everywhere. When I was a lawyer and even in the court, in the parliament, everybody calls me Moody. That's my nickname. Doesn't have any connection with the English meaning of Moody. It comes from cute. But the people who don't know me, they call me sometimes Eli, which is usually the shortage for Eliezer. Then I know these are people who never met me, but they claim to say they did.
Right.
The only one who
It's
called me
call.
Eliezer was my grandmother when she was angry. But Moody is my nickname everywhere.
Moody is your nickname. Well, my grandfather used to call me Mazik, which means person who damages things, right? It's like the Tasmanian devil. And I'm glad that it didn't stick like Moody stuck for you. So tell us how you got this love of the Beatles. We're going to get into Beatles specific stuff, but first I want to know about you and how did you get this love of the Beatles?
I think I was 11 years old, and it was the end of the school year, and I did pretty well. Most of the school years I did well. And my grandfather, not the one who was killed in the Holocaust, my other grandfather said, you did well. What would you like as a gift? And I said, a record, okay? And he said, okay, go and buy yourself the record. And I chose it because of the picture of Abbey Road. I didn't know the Beatles, okay? I just bought it because of the picture that I saw in older people, a little bit older than me, guys that has it at home, listening to the Beatles in the patiphones of those times. The record players, I put it and I just couldn't stop. I was playing the record again and again and again and again and again. And my mother thought I'm a little bit crazy because I had this little small a record player, not a stereo one. And I just played it and I was captured by the magic. And I think it took me only a few months to have all the collection of the Beatles records because each one was a new discovery for me. And ever since, I've become very curious to listen and to hear more. In those days, we didn't have the videos nor the DVDs or anything like YouTube or whatever we have today. So the records were the only resource, here in Israel at least. And then, since I'm talking here about the early 70s, the bootlegs came. In the same shop that I went to buy the record, suddenly had something new, different, very special. Those were the bootlegs of the... I think tapes from the Let It Be, the Get Back sessions, and live recording of the Beatles, especially the one in Japan, the Budokan Hall, the ones that were very good quality, because there you can really hear them playing, not only the audience, the fans screaming and shouting.
Right.
Yeah. And suddenly, it was just a noise and a little bit of a voice in the back. And in that time, it was not stereo, it was just mono. But when you listen to the recordings of the Let It Be sessions, it was like feeling you're in the studio with them, okay? And since video was not that available to see in that time, you had the Let It Be movie that I saw in the Cinematheque in Haifa in that time, but that was the opportunity to feel that you are close and to hear them talk and laugh and joke, etc. And when you hear the live performance, especially the one I mentioned to you, you feel like you are there. So it was not just the record and the song, and it was different. And with the Let It Be sessions on the bootlegs, you hear different versions of the same song. But another thing that was interesting when I bought the records and started to listen, suddenly I also understood that I know some of the songs from the radio, but I was a child, I did not connect it that way. And then it was, I think, 1975 or 1976, and there was a very famous, the icon of music in Israel, that is was having his radio show. Yoav Kutner, his name is very famous, and he did a 1 hour about the story about the Paul McCartney double. You know, is he dead and he was replaced, and all the whole story.
Right,
It
right.
was on radio. And then, you know, kids in my school that knew I loved the Beatles, I was in seventh grade, I think, they came to me and said, "Have you heard it?" And I said, "Yes." And, you know, what about it? And then we went to my house and we rolled back the records to hear what the clues are, you know, and looked with the mirror to see what it says on the Sgt. Pepper's drum and all this. And suddenly it became like an issue that made it even more mysterious and a kind of strange, because at that time, you didn't know what to think and what to believe. You know, it was a story, but it became amplified in Israel because it was on a major radio channel and with someone that was very authoritative. He didn't say that it's true. Don't get me wrong. He just presented it like a story, and he had
Right.
another hour later that shows that all the first clues in the first program were all bullshit. But it was like another mysterious thing. So all was combined together to a kind of, I would say, a kind of a spiritual performance experience. I used to listen to Because, which is for me like the greatest. I love the song more than maybe anything else. And if you close your eyes and you listen to it well, you can feel when hope is entering the room where you are as the music goes on. So it was like a magic for me. And I think that Abbey Road made it for me to love the Beatles more. Maybe if I was buying, I don't know, Please Please Me or With the Beatles first, maybe I would say, another group. I don't want to offend anyone.
Abbey Road is a classic, and I play music. I play guitar not well. I'm like the world's most mediocre musician, but being able to play through the Abbey Road album and being able to just do those transitions smoothly is a beautiful thing. So thank you for sharing that story. I love the fact that you actively went and sought it out. You actively went and became a part of the Beatlemania. It's pretty spectacular. You started this radio show in Israel in, I believe it was 1996, and you're on every Friday. Tell us about the radio show. What do you talk about? What do you play? What kind of stories do you share?
The radio show started in September, actually, very close to 29 years now. Someone that was I was then a member of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, and then the person that was the reporter for the Voice of Israel in the Knesset, he got the job of creating the regional station for the Voice of Israel in the north of Israel, okay? And he came to me and he said, would you like to have an hour? Okay? And I said, yes, sure. Why not? Playing Beatles music. Why not? He said, you know what? I give you 2 hours. So I had like 2 hours that I had to fill in. And I thought that it doesn't make sense just to play the music. You need to bring the substance that is interesting, like introduction in between the songs. So I had like 2 hours playing records in that time, because even the CDs were not that developed in the Voice of Israel branch in the north part of Israel. And since they didn't trust me with their record players, I had someone sitting with me in the studio, and I was handling the record. And she would play. I tell that, track 1, track 5, etc. And she was playing that on my behalf until they understood that I can play a record player by myself and press few buttons.
Right, you're
It was
qualified.
2 hours. Yeah. It was like 2 hours. In between, there were reports about the traffic jams, etc. It was a Friday between 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Then they closed that local or regional station, and they upgraded me to channel 88 FM, which is the channel, the music channel of the Voice of Israel, the major broadcasting station and national, and it's a national program. Now
Right.
I'm in another regional program since they changed their, like menu, etc. What I did is to play the music, tell stories, and the stories that I told usually were either connected to a theme. Let's say, I don't know, something happened and you tell the story. I'll give you an example. We're getting to the beginning of the new school year very soon. So when you get in this period, I like to talk, or I spoke about the idea that John and the Beatles had to open a school for their children and Bob Dylan's children, and they had like a whole idea how to teach in a school, and they put a committee to decide what they will study. Will they do gymnastic or not, and philosophy and theology? So it's like you tell a story that is relevant to current times. If, I don't know, Paul McCartney is on a show, Ringo Starr comes to Israel, so of course I do a few programs that are kind of talking in the relative topic. Sometimes it's about something that happened in a certain year in same time. You mentioned the Budokan Hall, so you say, okay, their tour to the Far East, which turned out to be a disaster. So we talk what happened in the Philippines, what happened in Japan, etc. Sometimes it's about news, sometimes it's about holidays. It depends. Like this, I choose a theme. But what I also do at the end of every show is to read a poem that is written by an Israeli poet in Hebrew, to bring to the ones that you love for Shabbat, for the weekend, instead of flowers, because the words in the poem will last longer than the flowers. And it kind of, you depart with some thoughts and points to think about for the weekend, for Shabbat. I usually do that, not all the time.
That's beautiful. Do you have your poem picked out for this week yet?
Yes, but but it's in Hebrew, so there's no point to discuss it now.
That's fair. Maybe what we'll do is in the show notes, we'll put the Hebrew poem and we'll put a translation so people can check it out. So,
okay.
All right, let's get into Beatles history, because that's really what this show is about. Before there was the Beatles, there was the Quarrymen, right? And this was the pre-Beatles, band, the band that became the Beatles. And there was a guy named Nigel Wally who was a musician in the band, and Nigel left the band and became their manager, and basically said, I'm a better businessman than I am a musician. And he was a member of the Lee Park Golf Club, and he approached a guy by the name of Dr. Joseph Seither and said, hey, your son is the manager of the Cavern Club. Can you hook us up, right? We'd like to play at the Cavern Club. He introduced him to his son, Alan, who was the manager, whose basic response was, no, dude, you can't play the Cavern Club. The Cavern Club is a famous club where good musicians play. But here at the club, at the golf club, there was a bar mitzvah this weekend and the band crapped out. And so can you play this show for us at the golf club? And they took whatever they could, and so they played this bar mitzvah, and Alan was blown away. He couldn't believe how good of a job he did. And within a couple of weeks, they were playing the side stage at the Cavern Club. I think it's called the skiffle stage, which was in between the main acts. They had a side stage of musicians who would play to entertain people between the acts. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term the skiffle sessions, but that's referring to these side stage acts. Then a few months of that, they were playing on the main stage. But even in those early days, before they were playing the main stage, they were playing at the Green Bank Synagogue, and they were playing youth dances and more bar mitzvahs and things like that. They were just honing their skills to get to the 10,000 hours. And I just find that unbelievable. When we talk about Jewish contribution and collaboration, they got their start playing at Jewish dances, and the Jewish managers who made it happen, sort of gave them a shot. I find that fascinating.
Well, yes, this story that was not really known and famous is highlighting how the Jewish connection is there. And of course, later on, I think the contribution of the Jewish people to the sharing the beauty of their music and their talent to the world. Of course, Brian Epstein is the major one. By the way, they say that when Paul McCartney's father heard that their manager later on, when Brian became their manager, is a Jewish person, then he said, "Okay, then now you're in good hands." In the sense that somebody that will know how to manage it, and he was a very successful person from that perspective, Brian Epstein. And it's not only that. You have later on the Sid Bernstein, who brought them to America. He was the impresario that decided to bring them to America without knowing anything about them. He didn't hear them even playing. He just read that there's something called the Beatlemania in Europe. So what he did was to call Malka Epstein. the mother of Brian Epstein, Queenie, that was her English name, and he
Right.
asked to talk. He called her home and asked her to talk with her son and tried to convince them to bring them to America. So without Sid Bernstein, maybe all that would not happen. So if
Yeah.
you think about the chain, the beginning and then the conquering England, exposing the Beatles to the young people in England and then in America and the rest of the world. Well, like in many things, the Jewish people have their own contribution. Maybe we're not in the front, but we are always there to make it happen. I take it now to another direction.
But
Technology, if you think about it.
before you do that, I want to say that Sid Bernstein is mentioned in our show, and the episode 6 of the podcast is about Shea Stadium and the song Twist and Shout, and that episode starts with the description of Sid Bernstein and how he made it happen. I mean, it was without Sid, we wouldn't have Taylor Swift Eras Tour, right? We wouldn't have the Grateful Dead's Wall of Sound. Like, what he did created stadium tours.
Yes, yes. And that was his vision. And
Yeah.
Brian was not sure about it. When he first introduced the idea to Brian Epstein after they were already in America, Brian said, well, maybe next time. He was not really sure that can happen. But Sid had a vision, and he also had a lot of guts, because when he committed to Brian Epstein, he didn't have even the money to pay for the bus, I think, to go to the stadium.
Right.
But he was doing it, and it turned out to be a magic.
Yeah. It's funny you say how he didn't have that. So there's the story that when Brian approached John and Paul and the Beatles in 1961 and said, I want to be your manager. And they were like, who is this guy? Like he walked up to the stage after a set and said, if you hire me, I'll make you bigger than Elvis. And John Lennon, who was a world famous, sharp-tongued smartass, said, I don't believe that you can do that, but I want my manager to believe that they can do that. And they hired him. And there's a lot of talk. You mentioned, his Paul McCartney's father saying, like, you're in good hands with a Jew. So another episode that is coming up is the 5th episode really dives into a lot of the offhanded comments that Paul and John said that could be looked at as anti-Semitism, could be looked at as homophobia, could be looked at as today we would call it politically incorrect or bigotry or something like that. But we talked to Leslie Cavendish, who is episode 2, and Leslie was there. Leslie was friends with Paul. He was friends with John. And I asked him these questions, and he said, no, Benji, like, this is how they talked. This is how people talked back then. It wasn't them talking like that. That's how people talked. And I was really grateful, in the show, I come to that conclusion, right? But I was really grateful to hear somebody who was there say, no, there was a deep love and respect. And while today you wouldn't make those jokes, that was how they talked. And
yes, I agree with you. I think that people were talking and behaving differently. That's like, times are changing. And also geographically, America, politically correct, is maybe not the politically correct of other places. And this, things are changing. I think that if they had anything of the anti-Semitism, probably they would not work with him. Definitely would not work with him for a long time. So I don't think, I think this is like a thought that sometimes is kind of following Jewish thoughts. Where do we stand? Are they against us or in favor? No, they were what they were. And they were just 4 guys from Liverpool that wanted to conquer the world, but they were kind of simple at least in the beginning. And I don't think that there was an issue like that at all. But on the other hand, take Brian as Brian, not as a Jewish person by necessary. It was not easy for him to get them involved. He invited them to his office, which was the shop of his parents. They ran a very big department store in Liverpool, and they had there also the music department. And he asked them to come in a certain hour in the afternoon, and they did not show. I think John Lennon came fully drunk. And Paul did not come. He was late because he was taking a shower. And Brian said to George, "But Paul is late. He's coming. He's coming very late." And George said, "Yes, but he is coming very clean." like because he took a shower, and that's so it was like and he planned everything, Brian, that they will come and he will impress them by the place and by talking and by his his suit. It was different thing in the clothes. He came dressed completely different from what they were in that moment. He turned them to dress the suits and everything as part of shaping the image of the Beatles. Okay, the Beatles that he saw and envisioned will conquer the world. But they were going with the teddy bear. It's called like the jackets, the leather jackets, black leather jackets. Yeah, and I think jeans and and boots, and they were not like his style of fashion for sure. And he was planning, and he had his assistant that was waiting there. And they just came late. People, the workers, employees left the shop, everything. Like, to imagine a big place, the lights are turning off, etc., and he's still waiting. So that was not really a good beginning in that sense. But they wanted to go with him. They believed in him, I believe. Otherwise, they would not do it. Yeah. Sometimes you can claim that you choose according to alternatives, and their alternative was Alan Williams. That was their manager, and they didn't really get along, or at least they didn't really get along to succeed together. And when Brian, I think, spoke with Alan Williams, Alan told him, I would not get close to them even with a stick. So like, be careful. They're not good guys. But Brian saw the potential. They saw, I believe, the potential in Brian's management. Right. From where he's coming from, and that's how things emerge to conquer the world.
Amazing. One of my favorite stories about the Beatles relative to the Jewish community that I found in this research was that in 1964 they booked a show in Israel at Ramat Gan Stadium. And you nodding your head. You know this story. So the education ministry, the rabbis in the education ministry.
No rabbis. It was the father of Yossi Sarid, who was actually leftist, later minister himself, minister of education, and leftist himself, like coming from the left liberal wing of Israel. His father was the director general, and it was not about religious at all. The story was that actually there are few, like always, in time you get few versions of the same story. But right. The real argument was that they are going to spoil the youth of Israel by performing, because think of the government in that time was a socialist government. Ben Gurion and all these guys, they were socialists, okay? People here in this country, years before, came to split of families because some supported Stalin, Joseph Stalin, and the others were communists but not supporting Stalin. And the government was completely social. It was not Netanyahu times where everything is flourishing, capitalistic economy, etc. It was completely different. So they said, they will spoil the youth. The second thing was that they needed cash. I mean, foreign currency in order to bring them here. And they said, we already brought an artist this year, Nana Mushkori, a lady singer from Greece. So we don't need the Beatles and Nana Mushkori in the same year. Come in another time. Then came an idea that they will come, and instead of paying with foreign currency, Israeli lira, it was a pound in that time, we will pay with oranges, like a barter deal. Okay, right. I read about that. I was like 2 years old, so I don't know it. I just read about it. So that was another direction. They said, okay, we'll pay with oranges. Just come. At the end of the day, it didn't work, and that was the story.
Wild. But I heard that it was rabbis in the education ministry who said they're going to corrupt our youth and they're going to cause mass hysteria and discord.
You are correct, Benji. Yes. The argument was that they will corrupt the youth, but it did not come from rabbis.
It wasn't a religious thing.
No, it was the socialists. The socialists who controlled the country in that time that said they will corrupt the youth that believe in, communism, etc.
Right. I don't want to get too far in the weeds in Israeli politics, but I do want to mention, and feel free to correct me if I don't say this properly. When you say socialist and you say communist, you're not talking about communism of Russia and China. The Israeli system is set up with a democratic socialism, which means that people who live on a kibbutz are living in a commune and are sharing, and they're not getting paychecks, and everybody is sharing equally, but you're not required to live in a kibbutz. Tel Aviv is not a kibbutz. Tel Aviv is a capitalist city. And so in Israel, you have socialist communes called kibbutzim, which is how a lot of the country was founded, but even, Jerusalem is not a socialist city. And so there's this coexistence of capitalism and socialism inside the country. And when people talk about where does socialism work, well, socialism works in Israel, where it's a socialist democracy. And so there's capitalism integrated by choice.
I think Israel is a capitalist country. It's not a socialist country at all, okay? You have places where socialism is still working, okay? But 98% of the country, if not 99%, is a capitalist country.
That's today, right? That's today.
Yeah,
that's not 50 years ago.
Right. 60 years ago,
right.
It was a little bit different because
right.
the party that was controlling the country, Labour Party, in that time it was called differently, was a socialist party.
Right.
But the difference is that in Israel in that time and before, when the state was established and before that, the pioneers, the Zionists who came here as socialists, they believed in what they do. So this is the difference. In a country like a Soviet Union, for example, they force you to be a socialist. People did not believe in the values. They just had to do it because that's what the dictatorship told them to do.
Right.
In Israel, freedom to choose was always there, okay? And as long as people believed in it, they did it. If tomorrow you want to establish a new kibbutz, you're welcome to do it if you believe in it, okay?
Right.
And in that time, more people believed in those values than today.
And more important, if you decide you want to leave the kibbutz, you're welcome to leave the kibbutz.
Right. Yeah, I'll tell you more than that. Most of the artists, the successful artists of Israel of that time, the 60s, early 70s, were people who left the kibbutz and moved and moved to the big city. The elders were left there. Young generation was feeling differently. They did not, you're born into an environment, and when you have the freedom to choose, you leave the environment if you don't like it. And then, the pioneers, they established it. They went because they wanted to be there. So they established the kibbutz. Next generation had always and still have, all generation has the choice, the option to leave. So when they don't want, they just come and go to the cities and live like we live in an apartment and do whatever we do.
Yeah. I believe in 2008, the Israeli government apologized to the Beatles and said this was a mistake. We should have let you in. Tell me about that, because I clearly the story that I read was inaccurate.
No. My friend Ron Prosor, who was the Israeli ambassador to England, kind of lounged and apologized for not bringing the Beatles. And we never spoke. I know him well for years. He's a very, very gifted person, diplomat, was the director general of the Israeli foreign ministry and still an ambassador and, served in very important roles, United Nations ambassador to the UN, Germany, England. And when I read about it, it was a little bit of a gimmick, because whom to apologize. The Beatles are not even, not a group, and it did not really offend the British people or whatever. I don't think even the Beatles themselves as individuals felt offended. So, but yes, that happened. You said 2000. I don't remember exactly. It was in that time, 2008. He was the ambassador to the United Kingdom, and I think this is when he apologized. Now I think he's ambassador in Germany. But there's no apologize, and after that, the Beatles as a group did not come here, but we had Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr performing here.
Mm-hmm. Must have been incredible.
Yeah.
How many times have they played? Do you know, in Israel?
Each one of them was here only once.
Only once.
Paul McCartney did a show in. It's not Ramat Gan, like you mentioned, which was then the biggest place. It's a park that is the biggest. And Ringo Starr did it in a stadium, but a basketball stadium, smaller. Mm-hmm. There's also a rumor that I read that John and Yoko were here on a TWA flight that had a stopover in Israel on the way somewhere, but they didn't come, I don't think they get off the plane or came into the country.
Gotcha.
TWA was an airline. It doesn't exist for I don't know, like 25 years or something.
Right. They too many hijackings. So, what was the story when we were talking previously? You mentioned with Rabbi Riskin.
The story goes back to I was representing or helping to sell a product of a company that makes water from the air. they take the air of, the humidity from the air and turn it into drinking water. And one day I came to that place in Tu B'Av, which is the Hebrew date of the equivalent of Valentine's Day, the day of lovers. And they told me there, this is the day of love, the Jewish tradition day of love. And because we love you, here is a bottle of vodka. Now, the guy who gave it to me was a Jew who made Aliyah immigrated to Israel from Russia. So I took the vodka, I told him thank you, and he says, why? Don't ask me why I give you a bottle of vodka. And I said you love me, it's the love day, and you came from Russia, so you gave me vodka, and maybe this is not politically correct, but I felt natural about it. So I said, no, there's a story behind it. And he tells me that this vodka is made in Jerusalem by a special distillery that is using the air of Jerusalem to take the humidity and produce the whiskey, vodka, and gin, okay? I went to that place, and there was a really very ultra-Orthodox person who established it and run it. I asked him for a meeting in advance, and we talk about, about what he does, and they have excellent products. It's called Thinkers, and I did now a commercial for them. And then the next day he calls me and he says, are you the famous Moodie Sandberg? And I said, well, I'm Moodie Sandberg, I don't know, famous, but that's me. Why didn't you tell me you have a radio show? I came home and I told my wife I met you, and she says, he's the one who runs the Beatles show in Israel for so many years. And I said, well, I don't know, you're like ultra-Orthodox person, and maybe I'm not that open-minded, so I did not think that this is one of the 10 most important facts I need to share with you. So he says, I was the trainee of, like the assistant of the judge in the case of Mark Chapman. Okay, because he became a lawyer and then he went into businesses. And then he told me the story, and I called Rabbi Riskin, who was a rabbi in New York in the 70s. And he said that he was, teaching or lecturing about about Judaism in a synagogue in upside of New York in Manhattan. And the audience was, free entrance, not by necessary Jewish people. And he told me that John and Yoko came there. He saw a couple, she was Japanese, and the other one was John. And they came a few times and even waited after the class to ask him a few questions. He didn't tell me what were the questions. And later on, they told him that these were John and Yoko. He didn't know in the time. So I heard that story from him. I never heard it from anyone else, but he's the one that was there.
That's incredible. That's incredible. My father had a similar story with Bob Dylan. So my father, when we lived in Israel, he did two things. He owned a restaurant, and he was also a rabbi. He was teaching at the diaspora yeshiva in the old city.
Mm-hmm.
And when Bob Dylan visited Israel, I think it was 1983. I don't know the year it was. But when Bob visited Israel, he toured Bob Dylan around, and he showed him around. And actually, in the autobiography No Direction Home, Bob quotes my father, but gets his name wrong. He calls him Yoso Rosenzweig. His name is Yossel Rosenzweig.
Yeah.
But he quotes him. And actually, speaking of musicians visiting Israel, my father toured another famous musician around Israel. So this is an amazing story. You a BB King fan?
Yeah, I know the name.
You don't know the name. Okay, so BB King is the king of blues. Okay.
Yes.
So if anybody corrects the dates or locations, feel free. This is as I remember my father telling it, but it might not be 100% accurate. So I believe it was 1973, maybe it was 1976, and BB King is on a world tour, and he comes to Israel. And my father gets hired as the guy to tour BB King around Israel. And they're doing two shows, one in Jerusalem at... No, I can't remember. Binyanei Homa, very good.
Yeah,
so they're doing like one at Binyanei Homa.
The biggest place in Jerusalem.
Yeah, Binyanei Homa, and the second show is at Caesarea. Okay, so my dad does his tour. He spends a couple days with them before the Binyanei Homa show, and then the next day somebody else is touring him around, and he's not doing it. So my father goes to the second show in Caesarea, and BB King comes out, And B.B. King was a large man.
Yeah.
He comes out on stage and he's limping, and he's got a bandage on his forearm, and he's got a bandage on the side of his face. Now, one of the things that B.B. King did famously was most people stand up when they perform. B.B. King always, because he was so big, he would sit on a chair and play sitting down. So he limps out to the middle of the stage. He sits down in a chair, and he looks around and he says, "I've had a wonderful trip to Israel, but this morning my tour guide took me to the Dead Sea. And as we were walking out to the Dead Sea, I slipped and I fell on the rocks, and I cut my forearm up, and I cut my face up, and I hurt my jaw, and I feel terrible." He goes, "So we're not going to sing any songs tonight. We're just going to play the blues, and I hope you're okay with that." And the band played for 2.5 hours straight, just jamming and playing the blues for 2.5 hours. And my father said it was the greatest concert that he's ever seen in his life.
Amazing.
And that was Casaria. And I hope that somebody reaches out to me and tells me that I got the date wrong, or I got the place wrong, or even better, if they've got footage or a recording or pictures, I'd love to see it. If you're listening and you have that, please reach out to me, because I would love to see those pictures and that footage. Mm-hmm. So, all right. I was told that you have some incredible Beatles memorabilia, and I would love to hear about your collection and what you got, and tell me something cool.
Well, I don't think I have such a great Beatles memorabilia, because you have to be very wealthy in order to own the very cool stuff. Okay, so I do have records that comes, from the original records, Christmas singles. I don't know how many people know, but the Beatles had a fan club, an official fan club that used to you have to subscribe to it, and every year before Christmas they used to send a single. A single was like a two sides music, and theirs was kind of floppy. It was not tough, and they send it as a gift with a Christmas message or New Year's message to their fans, and that is relatively considered to be quite a special item. You don't get to see much of them these years. And when they split, the fan club, of course, after a while also was closed. And then in 1970, since they did not record any record for that year, a Christmas record, they just collected all of them and put them on a one Christmas album that is also rare. I don't know, like I'm trying to think of things that they are authentic from their times. The wedding album of John and Yoko, the Two Virgins album, different stuff like that. Of course, a special signature and things like that.
Isn't the joke that at their wedding they couldn't find two virgins?
Yes.
Forgive me. I'm sorry.
I don't think it's a joke. It's a fact of life.
I wish I wouldn't have said that. So, anyway, that's great. Tell me, we're gonna wrap up shortly. Tell me a story about the Beatles and the Jewish community that you think I haven't heard yet.
Well, I'm sure you heard about everything, so it's very difficult for me to think about a story that it belongs to the Beatles and the Jewish community that you didn't hear. I'm trying to think of something that is very connected with the Jewish community. What do you think? What do you have in your mind? Because it's like,
I don't know.
as per specifically for a Jewish community, I don't see much of it. There are stories that are connected with Israel, and I'll tell you a story that I think can be relevant, not by necessary to a Jewish community, but to Israel. And probably it is worthy, and you will do a whole show about it, I guess, in the future. And this is the story of Akiva Nof, the Israeli later member of Knesset, a musician who was the reporter of the Voice of Israel in Holland when John and Yoko did their bad piece there in Amsterdam Hilton. And he asked them to record a song or to record a song for the Israeli audience. And John said, "I only know Hava Nagila," and he played for him, "I Want You, She's So Heavy," in one of the beginning versions of it. And then Akiva Nof asked them, "Can you sing a song that I wrote?" And he taught them how to sing a part of a song that he wrote that is called the Swear for Jerusalem, swearing in for Jerusalem. And the translation to English is, Jerusalem, we promise and swear you, we will never give up again. We will never let Jerusalem be taken away from us, the Jewish people. And John and Yoko are singing it in Hebrew. And the only group or musician who recorded this song, except for John and Yoko, was the rabbinical quarry of the Israeli army.
Huh.
So yeah, and I think it's a kind of a Jewish story maybe that fits what you were aiming to.
So I got great news for you.
Okay.
Episode 10 of this podcast is about Akiva Nof and the bed sit-in and exactly
Wonderful.
this. And I have the recording of John saying Hava Nagila and singing the
Hello,
song.
Israel.
Hello, Israel. Right. What I didn't know was that the only other person to record that song was the rabbinical corps of the army, and I'm gonna have to find that recording, and I got to hear it. And so there you go.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for. That's
Okay.
what I was looking for. So I'm very excited for episode 10. That's going to be a great day. The way that I'm ending every episode is really a look at this. The purpose of Storied, the idea, the thesis of Storied, is to take a look at the Jewish contribution and collaboration to a band. And we've talked about the Jewish contribution and collaboration to the Beatles, and over the next 14 episodes, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of more stories and some really amazing things. The reason why we're doing this is because Jewish events today are hard, right? And it's appropriately difficult. It makes sense. It's good common sense that things are hard today. You know, I often say that Jewish events today require a box of tissues and a therapy appointment afterwards, right? It's tough. So we're looking for Jewish joy, and this program really is that. It's Jewish joy. It's the good stuff. So I've got two questions for you. Number one, outside of Israel, when you look at the world, when you look at music, when you look at technology, what are the great Jewish collaborations that you're seeing today that come to mind that you are proud of?
If you look into technology, I think that you have a Jewish contribution or a Jewish and even Israeli innovation in most of the things that you use in your life. Okay, the first mobile processor was developed in my town in Haifa, where I am now, by Intel. Without that, all the laptops and all the other portable computers would not be with us. Without that, probably we could not communicate. Israel was so much and still so much involved with innovation that the disc on key was invented here. That's another example. Medicines. The inscription that we use in order to communicate, even to draw money from the ATM machine, they're all partly, at least, invented in Israel. The pill cam that replaces unpleasant medical the treatments. I can go through a long list that belongs some way or another to the innovation that was created in Israel. So many times when people attack us and say, or attack Israel and say, boycott Israel, say, if you really want to boycott Israel, you need to sit in the shade in a cave because all the rest of the technology somehow is connected either to Jewish people or to Israel. And but on the other hand, and I look into the positive part of it, I believe that the role of Jewish people is to bring blessing to the world, but not only to blessing to themselves or to ourselves. We share our blessings, we share the good things with the world. This is our mission. It's written in the Bible. So to be a light unto the nations, or lagoyim in Hebrew, a light unto the nations is in our blood, is in our DNA, if you like. So our desire is always to do good, but to share the good with others, to make the world a better place. And we did it, and we do it, no matter what people say and do and demonstrate. And we will continue to do that until the world will be a better place.
Yeah, that's beautiful. On the flip side of that, when you hear the words Jewish joy, or in Hebrew Yiddish nachas, right? When you hear those words, what do you think of? What is Jewish joy in your life?
I think the family, the children, the grandchildren, somehow at the end of the day, it summarizes there, okay? And maybe it's small, maybe it's not that important. Maybe it's a joy that I can describe and feel myself, and you will feel differently, and I cannot, transform it to you because it doesn't have an exact common basic ground. But the joy and the naches that we enjoy from our children and grandchildren, this is the base. We always like to do everything better for them. We take care for them, and we also believe that through them we will take care and make the world better. So for me, the joy is when I see them grow and succeed and happy and smile.
I love that. My grandmother had a sign in her kitchen when I was growing up, and it said, "Had I known grandchildren would have been so great, I would have had them first."
That's a good one. I fully agree with her.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, Moodie, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing some really beautiful and wonderful things with us. Thank you for being on the first episode of Storied. Yeah, I can't
pleasure.
thank you enough.
Thank you, Benji, for giving me the opportunity. And good luck and success in the next chapters of stories.
Next time I'm in Israel, we're gonna have dinner together.
Definitely. You're mostly welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
All the best. Bye-bye. Shalom.
Shalom. That's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps the algorithm show other people this great show. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, reach out. We would love to talk to you. Make sure you check the show notes for our links to socials and our sponsors. This show was produced by Ryan Storm from This Is Storm Sound. Editing was done by Andrea Rizzuto. The recording of the opening story was done live at the Berman Theater in the J Detroit in West Bloomfield with Soul Farm. Project management, Eric Nelson. Booking by Leanne Deutsch of 16 Mile Talent. Design work was done by Tessa Hewitt. And the music was recorded by Evan Sherman, but was written by my late father, Rabbi Yossel Rosenzweig, as the original opening of the song that he wrote for the Diaspora Yeshiva band Pit Chuli. I'm your host and storyteller, Benji Rosenzweig, and this has been another episode of Storied, the untold Jewish stories behind your favorite artists. Season 1, The Beatles.